So are there enough SIs? Are there enough consultants? Is there enough talent out there to be able to make this change? I would not answer that question, but I'll just ask people to be more mindful of this change which is coming. Take this seriously, plan around it, and just not think of this thing as another marketing gimmick from SAP, because if it were to happen, and the first one I'm very sure would happen, then there'll be a lot of people who will be left behind, and then you will have to go with the customer specific support model from SAP, which obviously has its own pluses and minuses, but you will not be on the standard support model. Okay, so that's something I really think people should think about deeply, because SAP for sure is moving the S/4HANA way.
Thanks so much for joining another edition of the Never-Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement for companies running SAP. With us today, we have the pleasure of Gagan joining us. He is with a company called NEC. He's an SAP enthusiast. He is an expert on moving from ECC to S4. And there's a handful, just a few dozen thousand people on LinkedIn follow him. So here, thank you, Gagan, for joining us. And I really appreciate you coming to share some of your wisdom with the team.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much for having me over. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. So when you think about generative AI and how that's being used within SAP, what's that driving? How would you describe that?
So Gen AI right now is mostly not in the core. Okay, so when we talk about SAP, there's a core, which is S/4HANA, and there are things or solutions around S/4HANA, and so SAP has largely played around the core right now. Okay, so we'll come to the core later, but for now, I feel generative AI is largely around the core. So it is present in success factors. That's where it has been used for quite a while now, and many users who are using it frequently on a daily basis. Okay, creating positions, making job descriptions, making their yearly goals, getting learning recommendations from success factors and whatnot. So that's one side where SAP has been able to bring in Gen AI really well. The other application has been the build code thing. So that's something I touched upon when I went to the SAP TechEd last year in Bangalore, and that's where we saw that Joule, which is alongside the Gen AI, but Gen AI is being used really well in the build code side of things. So you give a prompt and it gives you an application with data, with the model, with the services and whatnot. Okay, and similarly, there are some good cases on the Concur front, on the SAC front, and but largely I would say it has been on solutions around the core. Right, SAP has still not touched the core. SAP would obviously want to take it to the core, but right now it has been in solutions in applications around the core. So success factors, Concur, cash management, BTP build code, SAC is where SAP has touched Gen AI the most, I would say.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I know for our team, our Gen AI invoice automation tool is one more example of something around the core where it's not deep inside yet. And I know the SAP product team is building those capabilities on the roadmap. But again, they're a little further out. They're not here yet. So I know we're looking forward to those. One of the things that's gotten a lot of time and attention is something called Joule. And I know at Sapphire recently, this was a big topic. Can you talk a little bit about those capabilities of Joule within the SAP landscape and where you see that going?
So first of all, Joule is like a jewel, right? So JEWEL, and that's why they've named it Joule. And because that's a jewel for SAP, which is going to actually help them do very well in the market. Now it's a co-pilot to put things out uh, easily for people who have heard the word but who don't know what it is. So it's a co-pilot. It sits on your screen. It talks to you in natural language. You converse with it. So for those of you who know ChatGPT, it's like a conversation which goes on in ChatGPT. So you converse with it, and it helps you do a lot of work easily and faster in your SAP space. So SAP has largely made it for three things. Okay. That's what I like to highlight here, Sean. So one is navigational. So you navigate easier around SAP with Joule, because people who are new to SAP or SAP solutions always find it difficult to navigate around SAP. SAP is a big product. It's a behemoth. Okay. And I remember when I started using SAP way back in 2005, I found it really difficult to move around screens because there were so many screens. In the sales order alone, you have close to 35 tabs. Okay, so people get lost. So that's the first part where Joule helps, which is the navigation, right? So navigation is where Joule helps you. You ask it a question, where do I do this? And it gives you options, which are clickable options, and you directly go there and do your work. The other thing where Joule helps you is doing your transactions. So that's the transactional part of Joule. Okay, so just like I told you earlier, I want to make my goals on success factors. I want to make a job description on success factors. So I work with Joule to get these things done. So which is the actual part of my work, right? So transactional processing, make a position, or for that matter, do a travel booking on Concur using Joule. Now, these are transactions which you are actually performing, and that's something Joule can help you do. The third part is informational, which is getting information from the SAP system. I want to find out something. I need to go inside the SAP system, dig out things, open reports, open T codes, or open an application on Fiori and find things. Now that's where Joule comes in handy. Now, if you're using Joule on SAP Start, then in the SAP Start, it talks to SAC. Okay. And you just ask it a question saying, what has been our sale in India for the last 6 months for this particular product? And it comes out with a very beautiful pie chart or bar chart, and shows you the data, right? Now that is the information part of Joule is really the next level. Okay. Now this right now is on solutions outside the core. But as Christian Klein promised in Sapphire last week, and he's saying, I'll get 80% of the most used SAP transactions with Joule within this year. Now think of the impact that will have. I'm creating a sales order, and I want to know something about the customer. And I'm creating a purchase order for the vendor, and I want to know his on-time performance on delivery, right? Now that's something, again, that's informational, but within the core. Now, if I can get that, I don't need to go into 10 reports and find out whether this vendor delivers on time or not, right? And that will change the game like anything. That will make the users more efficient. That will make the users more comfortable with using SAP. Because right now, the biggest issue or the biggest question or the threat I find when I talk to new organizations who want to implement SAP is that their users feel very scared of SAP, right? And that's why also SAP moved from the GUI to the Fiori part, right? But just think of when Joule comes in, it's a helpful person sitting right there throughout the day, willing to answer your questions, taking you to where you want to go, helping you complete your transactions, uh, getting you information where you need. Say you just want to make one sales order for a customer, and you say, okay, uh, guess what? Hey Joule, can you make a sales order for Walmart, Pepsi, 600 ml and 1000 cases, which needs to be delivered by this Saturday. Okay, you just type it, and the work is done. You do not need to open an app. You don't need to open a T code. Joule has done it for you. So pretty big, and I'm really waiting for those 80% transactions to come in,
Me
and
too.
maybe we'll need to look at this conversation which we had once again then.
Yeah, I think the announcements that are made at some of the large events, I remember when S4 was first announced in 2015, because we've been live on it since 2015 as a customer. And
Okay.
I remember when Bill said it's all Fiori, and I remember thinking, all Fiori. It's a journey.
Yes. Yes. You're right. You're right. But for me, since I started my career as a functional consultant, Sean, and I've had users who I've trained for 5 days flat on making a sales order, and they still found it difficult, right?
Yeah,
But if SAP was to actually carry this out successfully, I think that will be a major change. And I would love to see that day when the end users are comfortable on the solution. And that will be remarkable.
I 100% agree. I consider the gold standard of something that's easy to use, something that you don't need training on, because it helps guide you, make that easier. I know this
Exactly.
part of that's what intake and orchestration does for procurement, as an example. So if you're trying to do that, you want to make it so easy for somebody to buy something that they don't need training to go make it happen. And then they don't need to wonder or feel like it goes into a black hole when it gets out the other end. So I think that gold standard of make it that easy it's difficult. It's simple as hard, but it's worth it because it means that we can go so much faster.
Exactly.
I was hoping that you could jump into just a quick overview of how is Rise different from what maybe people think of as the way they've deployed SAP today, or something that would be maybe more traditional SAP deployment model. What's different or new with Rise?
Okay. The way it used to be earlier was you would get some CDs or DVDs, and you would buy a big computer, which is called a server, and install it there, right? That's how it's all started. And then you started moving to, you have a connection to the SAP server, you download the software from there, you install it on your servers, and we used to call it on-premise servers because they used to be sitting on your premises, right? Which is basically your business premises, where you would have your server rooms, switches, routers, all those cables hanging out, etc. Right? Now that was the on-premise model, still quite popular with businesses because of the low cost, the apparent low cost that it provides to you, right? So you buy a server, use it for 5-6 years, then tell your CFO it is good to be used for another 3 years, stretch it to 9 years, and you have a low cost model. So that's what the on-premise model was. Now the Rise is slightly different. Rise is you telling SAP I need to use S4 HANA for 60 users, and SAP tells you, okay, we'll get everything done. We'll go to AWS or Microsoft or Google, get you a server. If you have a choice, give us, otherwise we'll get you a server. And then we'll deploy your SAP S4HANA application on that server, right? Once they do it, they give you the product. You can log in directly into that system, and you do not need to install your operating system, your VMware, your S4HANA, your HANA DB. All of that work will be done by SAP. Okay, so SAP was playing the role of supporting your application earlier. They'll still do that, but on top of that, they'll also play the role of supporting your infrastructure. Now that is a game changer. You were supporting your infrastructure earlier, but that support on infrastructure is now going to be done by SAP. So if your SAP is down, if you're not able to connect, if your people in certain plants are not able to log into SAP, you don't do it yourself now. You go to SAP and SAP helps you do the job. So SAP is basically telling you, you do what you are best at, which is running your business, which is making good products which your customers like to buy. You leave the ERP backend part to us, right? So S4HANA is yours. You configure it, customize it the way you like. Obviously, you're allowed to do that, but you leave the backend part to us. Don't worry too much about whether you have the right RAM, whether you have the right hard disk, whether you have deployed it on the right server. Leave all of that to us. We do all of that. You just concentrate on your business and getting the best out of your SAP. And within Rise, there are two models, public and private. So private is basically getting your own server where you can do all your customizations, you can do all configurations the way you want. It is just like on-premise. The only difference is it is on the cloud, and that cloud has been hosted by SAP. The public cloud, however, is drastically different. And how is that? Now it is S/4HANA with the same tables, with almost the same programs, but SAP has changed the tech stack. That is one. Okay. Second is you do not get to see SAP GUI, which is the screen people are comfortable with for about 40, 50 years now. So you do not get
I
to see that screen.
those are the screens that SAP GUI. Those are the screens that people that maybe gave SAP a reputation that didn't want, right?
Yes. Yes.
I think
But
that's important. Some people got used to it, but that's also called Stockholm syndrome.
yes. But that those are also screens, Sean, which are loved by your biggest customers like PepsiCo, Levers, P&G, Coke, and because people don't want to change. So people found it difficult to learn those screens, but now that they have learned it, they don't want to give it up, right? And that
It's
is
super
where
powerful.
SAP, yes, SAP will actually find it difficult to transition on-prem guys to public cloud. Whereas for a new customer who just knows SAP, thinks SAP is great, for him to come to public cloud will be much easier. Why? Because screens are simpler. That was the whole simplification thought, right? SAP brought in Fury so that you have simple screens, basic apps where you can do your things faster. But your behemoths, right? Like Pepsi, Coke, Levers, P&G, right? 50,000 licenses, 1 lakh licenses. All those people out there using the SAP GUI for up to years, how do you move them to public cloud, right?
Change is
So,
hard,
so
isn't it?
they'll ask you that question, and and then SAP needs to ask itself that question. So that was basically Rise. So majorly public cloud and private cloud. There's also a thing called customer data center or CDC, where you bring in your own data center and SAP takes care of that. But that's relatively a lesser used option right now.
Yeah, I think that ability to offer options where the solution as a service, software as a service, as opposed to only the software or only the infrastructure, I think it's a really powerful offering. And to anybody that wanted to squeeze those servers just a little bit longer, I think everybody can think of those times where they pushed them just that extra few years because somebody said it'll probably be fine, and then suddenly they were ad hoc testing their disaster recovery plan. This
Yes,
is
yes, that has
not the
happened to
time or
quite
place
a
to do
few
this.
organizations. Exactly, exactly. These are mission critical systems.
Yeah,
People still think the way they thought 30 years back. 30 years back, maybe you were a $1 million organization. Now you are $1,000 million organization. So your thoughts need to change. The way you need to plan your systems, the way you plan disaster recovery needs a big change. So yes,
yeah. The cost of being down for an afternoon or for a day if something went wrong is
yes,
drastically different. And
yes,
I know the number of people that have had their IT organization internally say, that's okay, we know how to run servers, we're really good at it. And then that same CIO goes on a tour of one of these hyperscaler data centers where it's just a whole other level. And then this is an opportunity, I think, for more organizations to look up and out off of what they're accustomed to today and to consider that what they are accustomed to, that what they know today or what was traditionally done, or maybe the way they've always done it, that's not what good looks like anymore. It might have been what good looked like 10, 20 years ago, but good moved and got better. And
yes.
organizations need to get better with it. And it's hard sometimes for people to let go of that. But for all of the organizations that started small and grew, or for the organizations that started doing something 20 years ago and they need to do it in a more modern way, this is a huge opportunity. And I thank you very much for describing that, because this is, I think, one of the things that more people really need to think about, really need to understand. And it is an apples to oranges. So it's not easy to go, well, it was this much before and this much now. Because what did you include in this? Did you include all the people that look after it, the vendors that look after it? And the two of them are not necessarily easily compared.
Being in
Maybe,
NEC, this is something which comes to mind every day because it's a Japanese organization. Kaizen or continuous improvement is part of what you need to do every day. If
yeah,
you're good, you need to get better. If you're better, you need to do really good. Okay. You need to continuously improve yourself. You can never be at your 100% because the 100% keeps shifting. So
yeah.
thanks, Sean, for bringing that up.
Just jumping on the Kaizen model, if I dust off my lean belt, I come to think of the expression go to the Gemba, which is where you go to where the work is happening. And one of the next level opportunities is for organizations to go to the Gemba, go look where the work is being done. And if that's how SAP is being managed, deployed, and served up to the organization today, go and look at how that is being done. Don't stop there. Go and look at other organizations and how they
Right.
do it. Because
Right.
the answers within the four walls of your organization can be a dangerous, dangerous echo chamber. And this is one of those opportunities to go and look up and out at what good looks like elsewhere. And don't just take the 2% better or 5% better, because that'll help. But it can also create an opportunity where your competition is leapfrogged and you haven't. And that gap widens over time because now they have compounding 2% on this while you're getting 2% on that. So yeah, Guy, this is so important. Thank you. Maybe if
Thanks.
we change gears just a tiny bit,
Yep.
because of your experience in and around SAP, if there's something that you have on your heart, kind of something that worries you, probably doesn't keep you up at night, but something that worries you, something that you really want organizations to think carefully about, and maybe around this transition or around changes in the industry, if there's one thing that you really want to make sure that leaders are really thinking hard about because you're concerned that the change hasn't been really considered and internalized and actioned yet, what would that be?
Okay, Sean, you've touched my nerve. Okay. Thanks for asking that. And that's something I want to talk about and shout each day on LinkedIn. I don't, but that's important. Okay, so let's talk about it here. So SAP has given us three dates, right? Or rather two, 2025, 2027. And post which SAP says, I'll stop supporting your ECC instances. Okay, 2025 for people who are at a certain EHP level and below. And for others who are at the 6, 7, 8 EHP levels, it's 2027. Now, I see people around, I see CIOs and CFOs and MDs not worrying too much about it, thinking that SAP has pushed the date earlier and SAP is going to do that again. One, personally, I doubt that's going to happen. I feel it is going to happen this time, and people who have not moved EHP levels will be out of support on 1st of January 2026. Okay. And when that happens, the others will be reminded of the fact that 2027 is coming. And SAP is surely not going to blink on the lower EHP levels, which is happening in December 2025. Again, this is something I feel personally. And organizations are not planning enough for it. Organizations are not thinking enough about the change. They're not talking to enough people. And they are not going to their MDs, their CEOs, their CFOs, and asking for funds for this transition. Okay. Now, I'll just give you a figure, Sean, and that's a very basic maths figure. So, S/4HANA came out in 2015. We are in 2024. It's about 9 years now. And a rough figure, I don't know the actual figure because SAP does not publish it. Between 30 and 40% of organizations have moved from ECC to S/4HANA. So we still have about 60-65% organizations which would be moving from ECC to S/4HANA. Now, do we have enough years for that movement? Because even if you go in for an extra plan, even if you give it extra amount for your annual maintenance to SAP, you still need to do this transition by 2030. Okay. So by all means, we have about 6.5 years left. I'll still not count the last 6 months. So we have 6 years left. What could not be done in 9 years, okay, has to be done in 6 years for almost double the percent. Okay. So are there enough SIs? Are there enough consultants? Is there enough talent out there to be able to make this change? I would not answer that question, but I'll just ask people to be more mindful of this change which is coming. Take this seriously, plan around it, and just not think of this thing as another marketing gimmick from SAP. Because if it were to happen, and the first one I'm very sure would happen, then there'll be a lot of people who will be left behind, and then you will have to go with the customer specific support model from SAP, which obviously has its own pluses and minuses, but you will not be on the standard support model. Okay, so that's something I really think people should think about deeply, because SAP for sure is moving the S/4HANA way.
I 100% agree. It's a little bit like if you know a big change is coming,
Yes.
don't be one of the last
That's
people
like
to
if
try to
the
line up.
bear is coming to eat you, and you don't need to beat the bear, you need to beat the other two, right? So almost a similar situation here. Yes,
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. If you don't want to get eaten by the bear. Some people say don't be first, don't be last, don't volunteer. I don't really like that one, but I think that there's a lot of truth in the bell curve,
exactly,
and you
Sean. The
want to
bell
move
curve
with the
in
bell
this
curve,
particular
not at the
case is
tail end of
very
it,
important.
right? If you're looking for a talented landscaper, don't wait until the middle of summer to hire them, because all the good ones have already been hired, is one other analogy that comes to mind. There's something else that I really wanted to ask, because you've had such a successful career. And I know that there's a lot of people that are in their early 20s, they're getting started in their career, and they'd love to hear some advice. You know, when we were talking before we pressed record, there's a lot of people that have a career that they're just getting started on, and they look up to people like you to say, hey, what do you wish you knew when you were early in your career? What skills do you look back and wish that you'd learned that would help you now? And I know there's a lot of people getting into maybe a functional consultant role. What would you invite them to really think about? What would you encourage them to learn to help them in their careers?
Right, Sean. When I started my career 2007, it was functional separate, technical separate, and technical was not too technical. It was just the ABAP and the basis, and you had one guy on the basis front, some few guys on the technical front, and mostly a functional team which would end up implementing SAP. Okay, the world has entirely changed in these last 17 odd years, and that's the world of SAP, where SAP is getting more functional and also getting more technical side by side, right? So if you're a leader, so finally 17 years down the line, and if you are in the APAC region, you would end up being a project manager, a program manager, a leader who's guiding the team. So when you are doing that, you would want to know the technical side of things. Okay, so if I was to guide someone and say that if you're starting out as a functional consultant, say a success factors consultant, or a SDM, MPP, FIQ, MPM consultant, you also should, because when you are young, your mind has a lot of capacity to learn. You don't perceive things negatively. There's some time the bosses give you extra space because they know you are new, etc. I would say that it's the time to pick up things on the technical front as well, right? Because SAP is getting more technical. There are new functionalities coming up, there are new modules coming up, but simultaneously, SAP is also getting more technical. We were talking about Gen AI earlier. We were talking about Joule earlier. Even to use Gen AI, if you were to use Gen AI in your public cloud, which is the new thing uh, announced by Christian Klein, right? You still need to plug your models with SAP, right? Which model should I use? Which API should I use? When should I use one model versus another model, right? All of this is technical stuff, right? So when you are starting out, keep a lookout for technical stuff. Don't hate technical stuff. Um, at least 30 to 40% of technical stuff is something that you should understand. It will not help you now, maybe, but when you are a senior manager, when you are a program manager, a project manager, taking care of the entire SAP BU, that's the time this will really come in handy for you. And
I love it. Become more rounded.
that's, yes, become more rounded.
There's this idea of a T-shaped consultant where you're deep in one area, maybe if
Okay.
you're in materials management or procurement or something like that, but
Right.
you also understand enough about the other ones that you don't always have to go and call a friend if you need to set up a cost center, or you don't need to go and get somebody to look over your shoulder to figure out how this customization or extension was done. Those are
Exactly.
such important skills. Gagan, I really appreciate you joining today. Thank you so much for helping shine your light and share your wisdom with the community. I hope all of you have learned a whole bunch from this. This has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement for Companies Running SAP. We'll see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sean.